You're watching News at Prime. Let's bring you this discussion now. The upcoming national dialogue continues to generate mixed reaction from various quarters of society. Those in favor are calling it a much-needed forum to map the future of the country, while critics describe it as an expensive talk shop. Let's discuss this now, and we're joined by the New South Institute's Public Service Reform Head, Yoliswa Makhasi. She's on the virtual platform, and in studio with me is political commentator Malaika Mahlatsi. To both my guests, good evening to you. Thank you very much for your time. Can I begin this conversation with the problem statement? And that is, what is the national dialogue solving for, to your mind? Let's start with you, Malaika.
So I think the national dialogue is trying to solve for the lack, or what is assumed to be rather, a lack of representation of the voices of South Africans in architecting the solutions to the problems of the country. I think it wants to be representative. It wants to bring in different voices of ordinary South African people across all walks of life, across all divides, and it wants to bring them in to basically reimagine and fashion the kind of South Africa that we want to see and that we want to live in. Yeah. Supposedly, that's what it seeks to do.
Okay, let me put that question to Yoliswa Makhasi, who is joining us virtually tonight. Yoliswa, good evening to you. And to your mind, good evening. The national dialogue, what is it trying to solve for?
Well, I firstly agree with Malaika on studio that it is trying to solve for inclusivity, ensuring that everyone is participating in dealing with challenges and aiming to resolve challenges of South Africa. But I think also it is trying to really create a platform to recalibrate the implementation of the NDP and ensure that there is improvements from the point of view of service delivery and implementation broadly.
Yeah. All right. Both of you have written around this upcoming national dialogue, and so it's only fair to tell the viewers what your viewpoints are, and then we'll continue the conversation. Malaika, you've written a piece recently, and you're saying, and I want to quote directly from the headline of your article, and that is that the national dialogue is a distraction from failure to achieve meaningful transformation. Do you want to expand a little bit on that?
No, certainly. So, Xoli, I think that the national dialogue is a reflection of the continuation of something very deeply problematic that has happened in South Africa, particularly under the administration of President Cyril Ramaphosa. And that is the emergence and crystallization of something that we call institutional fundamentalism. And that is, institutional fundamentalism basically is the theory and the practice of creating new institutions as a way of resolving the problems of existing institutions. And I think the administration of President Cyril Ramaphosa over the years has become masterful at that whenever there is a problem within an institution, it creates new institutions. You look at the kinds of committee, advisory committee, envoys, and all of that, things that should be done by institutions within the state. When they are when they're failing to do that, the president thinks that the solution is to create new platforms, new institutions. So the national dialogue as well, in my opinion, is a continuation of that kind of thinking, that because in South Africa, there's been a lot of dialogues in this country. There are ongoing dialogues on a daily basis in different forms, right? In BISOs, in IDPs, in all kinds of things that are happening in South Africa. But when there is a sense that there is no, there is a failure in those things, because there has been a lot of criticism leveled at, some of the, the makeup and, kind of failures of implementation that come with these dialogues. The thinking then becomes, let's create a new platform where we are going to do something that is already being done in various other forms and in various ways. And I think that that's quite a very problematic way of dealing with the challenges that South Africa is confronted with. I think the national dialogue is a distraction also, because a lot of dialogues, like I'm saying, are happening in the country, have been happening in the country. Yeah. There has not been clear implementation of those. And rather than deal with the problem of implementation, monitoring and evaluation, we are creating a new platform to replace what is not working.
And you probably are touching on something that is the biggest failure here. And it's been admitted to by a number of ANC politicians. And I'm singling out the ANC because it has been in government for the longest time. Never mind the government of national unity now. Yoliswa, your article talks about public service reform that must be at the center of South Africa's national dialogue. Flesh out a little bit what you are suggesting there.
Well, firstly, my view on the dialogue is that it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to put the reform agenda at the center of engagements that will be taking place. I don't see the dialogue like Malaika is seeing as institutional, as an institution. I think that it's a mechanism that is put in place in order to facilitate conversation. The president in his SONA spoke about it as a common ground to engage, as well as a platform to look at new solutions to some of our current socio-economic realities and governance challenges that we're facing. So I think it's an opportunity and an opportune platform to really look at the engine of service delivery, which is government. And I'm arguing there that one of the biggest crises that we have in South Africa is poor service delivery. And there's a number of factors that contribute to poor service delivery. And this relates to the conduct of politicians, to the conduct of public servants, and the disengagement of civil society on matters related to reform. So these conversations on reform become conversations of elite government people, a small group of elite government people. So it's important that these conversations, we take them out there to society, and we use the dialogue to be able to do that. It's true that there's talking in South Africa, in all corners of South Africa, but I think in the manner that the dialogue is planned, I think it will give volume to such, and also hopefully will come up with very clear commitments around how we conduct ourselves as public servants, as politicians, and some code that we are going to assess ourselves by and live by in terms of moving forward.
Yeah.
So I have not seen the actual agenda, but I'm just throwing some of the things I'm hoping will come out of the dialogue.
In a way, Yoliswa, before I move on from you, and I'm struck by this because you, in your article, are also answering the very question that I think Malaika has already sort of touched on, and that is that this national dialogue is merely masking the failures, and you are pointing to what the problem is. And I'll tell you exactly where I find that in your article. And I read now, there is a lack of political courage, administrative resolve, and a sense of urgency. The national dialogue will fail the people of South Africa who depend on government services if it does not place the administrative reform agenda at the center and contribute to improving public services. There is the nub for me. Do you agree?
Oh, yes, I wrote that, so I fully agree.
So if there is a lack of political courage, administrative resolve, and a sense of urgency, why do we need a national dialogue to tell us exactly that?
The national dialogue, in my view, gives us an opportunity to further speak about these issues and to further put pressure and to ensure commitment. And I did say earlier on that obviously there's a conduct issue about politicians, there's a conduct issue about public servants, but also civil society. Change in society will happen because civil society is able to stand up and deal with some of these issues that we're struggling with. And as I said earlier on, public sector reforms are quite a niche area. So it is difficult for members of civil society in their broad nature to be able to track some of these things that are happening on an ongoing basis. All they experience is the breakdown in terms of service delivery. So we're saying fix the engine, fix where things are going wrong so that you can improve in terms of delivering services.
Malaika, will we
use the dialogue as well to be able to put pressure in respect and to look for new solutions, as well as put pressure in terms of how we move forward and support the NDP, because the NDP is still the policy guidance that we have from our government that guides the implementation. So let's bring it at the center and ensure that we recalibrate and push for the implementation of the NDP.
You'll forgive me, Malaika, if you think that I am belaboring a point here that is that's of no importance, but I found this quite striking, particularly coming from a recent senior administrator in government, because that's what Yoliswa is. If there is a lack of political courage and this administrative resolve, including a sense of urgency, how do we fix this engine? Because these are the very same people that South Africans vote for in order to start the engine so that the car gets moving in order to deliver their services. They are the engine, are they not?
So it's quite very interesting, Koli, that you raised that point, because one of the issue that I wanted to raise now with regards also to what Sisioli, I call her Sisioli, she's our elder.
Indeed.
What Sisioli said about how, one of the things that must come out of this is that, she's talking about poor service delivery and how some of those things have, and you are now raising the issue about, these people that we are putting at the center. Koli, quite very briefly. Local government, the local government sphere is the coal face of government and of service delivery, right? Municipalities are the coal face. That is where service delivery happens. That is the people's first interaction and main interaction with government, right? And I said earlier on that one of the things that is quite very problematic about the national dialogue is that we are saying that there is no dialogue with people. People are not, there's no inclusivity and so on. And yet at a local government level, you've got something called the IDP, the Integrated Development Plan, right? Which is really like it guides municipalities, municipal development rather, over a 5-year period. You are bringing, ordinary members of society, you are bringing stakeholders within a community, right? So let's say in Ekurhuleni or in Johannesburg, when you are having these dialogues for the IDP, because the people then get to decide what are their priorities, what are the key issues that they want to look at. And it looks at all kinds of issues, spatial planning, infrastructure, economic development, social development, and so on. People are engaging at a local level on these issues. It's a constitutional mandate. People are engaging on these issues of poor service delivery, and they're talking about what is this thing that they envision. It is a constitutional obligation for municipalities to do that. And so I think for Sisioli to come and say that, this national dialogue is going to talk about issues of poor service delivery, when we've got this IDP process that is flawed, that we know is flawed, and we've not done anything to deal with this flawedness of this process to ensure that the ideas, the thinking, and the aspirations of people are realized, then we say on this thing that is flawed, the IDP, Let's leave that a bit and use the national dialogue as a platform to assure service delivery. It's quite a bit problematic, and it goes back to the issue that she's raising about the lack of lack of political will, right? There is clearly a lack of political will. There is poor evidence. There is no evidence-based planning in our municipalities and in government broadly. And more than anything, Koli, there is no monitoring. You have all of these IDPs, you have all of these imbizos, and all kinds of dialogues. And people are saying what needs to happen in their local level, at national level, at provincial level. There is no follow-up. And so what ends up happening is that every year, the same politicians who would have gone to engage with people about what they want to see happening, how they can participate, are the same people who are going back. And we are now having a national dialogue that says, let's go back and do the same process that government is doing at all kinds of levels. It's dishonest.
Let's go back again to your article, Yoliswa, because you remind us that Cabinet approved what is called the Professionalization Framework in October of 2022. Simply put, this is a policy that was there to try and make sure that government workers are professional. You are professionalizing the state. How far has implementation gone? And I feel so happy that I have a recent government head of department coming to answer exactly this question that you point out in your article.
Well, I think firstly, Koli, I can't speak for government now. I'm outside of government, but I am aware that there is implementation that's taking place of the professionalization framework. I think the biggest issue is exactly what Malaika is raising, monitoring and impact. And I think it's also quite too soon to be talking about impact in relation to the professionalization framework. And it's something we must keep an eye on. Both the Minister and the Deputy Minister of Public Service and Administration spoke on this matter when they were speaking at the budget vote, even though I felt that there's more detail that could have been presented in terms of just preliminary successes that are being registered, since the framework is still new from the point of implementation. And I think the one other thing I want to say is that I don't view the dialogue as a replacement of dialogues that are taking place in our communities. I think that dialoguing is about strengthening, it's about interfacing with those dialogues, and it's about strengthening that what's coming out of those into a bigger policy agenda that must be monitored and implementation that must be monitored.
Yeah.
So I don't think we should say the dialogue is going to replace those local activities that are taking place. It shouldn't be doing that in any case. Thank you.
Izimbizo, Malaika, I mean, what role do they play? You would have heard the president, I think this week that we have just gone through, talking about the presidency, because this was about passing the presidency budget vote, that the presidency is almost the public face of government. He calls it, if you take it to the international platform, he calls the presidency the chief diplomat of the country. That's who he is. He is the ambassador of this country. And so when he leads an Imbizo, many of these we have seen, and there are millions that go into that, by the way. Why aren't these seen as a dialogue, the very national dialogue that is planned? In
fact, I don't even think just, Xoli, one of the things that I said in the article that you're quoting is that when we talk about dialogue, we are, I think we also become quite narrow to think that, a dialogue is simply about, we sit down and we have these formal engagements, these costly engagements that we're talking about. But dialogues happen in different forms as well, right? Service delivery protests are a dialogue. They are and people don't think about it in that sense, right? But these are people articulating, and that's why a lot of these service delivery protests and a lot of protests that we see in the country, whether it's on GBV and so on, people will be having a kind of like a memorandum, a list of demands that they will be, submitting to a councillor, to a minister, and something like that, and so on, right? Yeah. On a daily basis, the people of South Africa are engaging in all forms and manner of dialogue with their government, right? Whether you're talking about writing opinion pieces, writing into the ANC Today publication, getting into service delivery protests, right? Even that we look at and we think this is not some kind of a dialogue. There is a communication that is happening there between the people of South Africa, and they are saying something to their government. They are making demands. They are engaging their government on some of the things about which they are dissatisfied. We do not have in South Africa a shortage of dialogue. We absolutely do not have a shortage of dialogue in this country. In fact, I dare say we have got an excessive presence of dialogue and a very limited and almost non-existent process of following up about the things that people are raising in these dialogues, in these kinds of different forms of engagement with their government. And I think that's really the issue that we should be looking at. I think for me, if the president had come out and said that, not a national dialogue, but we are having a national, kind of almost like a national audit of the dialogues, and we're doing a national audit of the dialogues, and we're following up on those audits of the dialogues that have happened, I would have been the first person to have been fully in support of that, something like that, because I do believe, having been, Sis Yoli, in fact, I know her because myself, I've been a government official for quite some time, right? And so I know that there is a lot of work that is being done there. I would have been the first person to support it, but I'm sitting here as a government official, and I'm not supporting that process, because I do think that there is a lot of monitoring, a lot of implementation that needs to be done that should be audited.
Before I go back to Yoliswa so that we close the conversation, in your article, you draw parallels between South Africa and Zimbabwe. Give us the context there, because time and again, Zimbabwe is almost used as an example of where South Africa is going if we don't fix things.
So in the article, the contrast that I'm drawing between South Africa and Zimbabwe, I'm making the argument that in South Africa, we have got a lot of dialogue. Dialogue is happening in this country. And I'm actually using the example about Zimbabwe and how, because the president, when he was speaking about the national dialogue, made a reference to how the national dialogue would almost be like CODESA, how CODESA was necessary towards, fashioning a new South Africa at the end of apartheid and so on, and so on. So I was saying in the article that, in fact, in South Africa, what we have is that we've got a lot of these dialogues that are taking place. We're a country that acknowledges, we don't have a shortage of the acknowledgement of the issues that we are confronted with. We're a country that also speaks very eloquently and very publicly about the traumas of our past. And there's a lot of research in South Africa. The impact of apartheid today, Stats SA releases this and talks about the ongoing impact of apartheid and so on. On the other hand, in Zimbabwe, you have got a government, and that's why I think a national dialogue might be necessary. I'm saying that it's necessary in Zimbabwe, because you've got a government that simply does not acknowledge a lot of the things that have happened in Zimbabwe. The first and the main one being the Kukurahundi genocide or massacre that happened in between 1983 and 1985, where over 20,000 people in Matabeleland were killed at the time the ruling ZANU-PF government and the 5th Brigade, which was a military wing of that government. And so I'm saying in a country like that, I can understand why you need a dialogue. People's pain has not been acknowledged. People's participation and engagement with the national building project has not been engaged in Zimbabwe. There, a national dialogue might make sense. In a South Africa where this has been ongoing and it's part and parcel of our culture to dialogue, I'm not convinced that is something that becomes as necessary as perhaps an audit of the other dialogues that have taken place and what needs to be done there.
And let's conclude the conversation quickly with you, Yoliswa, because as Malaika says, you are clear that South Africa has no shortage of visionary policies. But the question here is about implementation. Are you able to answer this in 30 seconds as to whether or not we are succeeding or failing in implementation?
I think that we are not succeeding in implementation. We have a lot of policies that we are struggling to implement. As a result, we have these challenges of service delivery, challenges or crises, and therefore I think that implementation of our policies must be at the center of whatever conversations that are taking place, and we have to find a way to improve how we do things.
Yoliswa Makhasi, thank you very much for your time, and in studio, Malaika Mahlati, thank you so much.
Thank you very much
for making time for this important conversation. Let's take a break. When we return,